Hey, my name is Owen. I'm 38. For 2 years, I've kept a promise to a dying friend. Every other Saturday, I show up to fix a leaky faucet or patch the roof, never staying for supper, never letting myself notice how Maya's laugh was starting to reach her eyes. Last month, under the kitchen sink, I heard Tom's twin girls whisper, "Mommy smiles because of you." Tom and I were brothers in everything but blood. We framed houses together until cancer took him 2 years ago. I swore his wife Maya and twin girls would never be alone. Every other Saturday I fixed a leak, patched a roof, left before supper. Duty, nothing more. But when Ellie and Nora said their mother smiles because of me, the wall I'd built around myself began to crumble. Now I'm caught between honoring a dead man's promise and the terrifying possibility that the life I've been avoiding is the one I'm meant to live. Tom made me swear it on a Tuesday afternoon in late August, the kind of day where the light through the hospital window made everything look faded and temporary. The cancer had hollowed him out, but his grip on my wrist was still strong enough to hurt. "Maya won't ask for help," he said. "She's proud. And the twins will need someone who remembers what I sounded like. Promise me you'll check in. Just check in. Make sure they're okay." I promised. I didn't think it would become the only thing holding me together. We built houses for 12 years, Tom and I, framing walls that would become other people's homes. We never built our own. He met Maya at a hardware store when she was buying paint for a nursery she couldn't afford, and he gave her the contractor discount even though it almost got him fired. They married in the backyard of the first house we ever framed together. I was his best man. 2 years later, Ellie and Nora arrived, identical, fierce, with their father's crooked smile. I held them both before Tom did because he was too scared he'd drop them. We were family in the way that doesn't require blood. Then came the diagnosis. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. They gave him 6 months. He fought for 14, long enough to see the twins start kindergarten, but not long enough to teach them how to ride a bike. At the funeral, Maya stood at the graveside with a daughter holding each hand, her face a mask of composure that I recognized from my own mother's face decades earlier. I knew that look. It was the look of someone who had decided to survive for the children but had no idea how to survive for herself. I started showing up on Saturdays. At first, it was just the things Tom would have done. The leaky faucet, the loose shingle, the garage door that never quite closed all the way. Maya would offer coffee. I'd drink it standing in the kitchen, never sitting down, never staying more than an hour. The twins were 4 then, too young to understand why the tall man who smelled like sawdust kept appearing but their father didn't. Nora asked me once, "Are you here to bring Daddy back?" I didn't have an answer. After that, I started fixing things while they were napping, so I wouldn't have to face their questions. Months turned into a year. The house stopped needing so many repairs, but I kept coming. I told myself I was honoring a promise. I told myself Tom would have done the same. But somewhere along the way, I started noticing things I had no business noticing. The way Maya's hands would pause over the coffee pot when she thought no one was watching. The curve of her neck when she bent to tie the girls' shoes. The fact that the silence between us had become comfortable, then expectant, then something I couldn't name. I never stayed for supper. That was my rule. It felt too close to what Tom would have done, sitting at that table in the chair that used to be his. I left before dusk, drove back to my apartment and ate alone. I convinced myself this was proper, noble even, a man keeping his word without crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Then came the Saturday last month. I was under the sink in the downstairs bathroom, replacing a garbage disposal that had been grinding wrong for weeks. Maya was in the kitchen folding laundry. The twins had been playing in the living room, but their voices had gone quiet. Then I heard them just outside the bathroom door. They're only 6, small enough that their voices carry in a particular way, like wind through a crack. "Mommy used to be sad all the time," one of them said. "Nora, I think, or maybe Ellie. I still can't tell their voices apart. Now she smiles," the other one whispered, "because of him. Because of me." I froze with both hands on the pipe wrench, my heartbeat suddenly loud in my ears. The garage disposal and the corroded pipes and the $10 bill I'd been planning to leave for the part all vanished from my mind. Every careful wall I'd built around my feelings collapsed into those 2 sentences. A 6-year-old had seen what I'd been too afraid to admit. Maya appeared in the doorway before I could move. Her cheeks were flushed. She was trying to shush the girls, her voice light and forced. "Ellie, Nora, leave Mr. Owen alone. He's working." But her eyes met mine for just a second, and in that second I saw fear, hope, and the same terrible uncertainty I felt. She looked away first and the girls scattered, and I finished the job in silence. I drove home that night with the wrench still in my passenger seat and the words spinning in my head. "Mommy smiles because of you." I thought about Tom, about the promise, about the way Maya's laugh had started reaching her eyes again. I thought about the fact that I'd been circling this house for 2 years, never landing, never leaving, like a plane that had forgotten how to land. And for the first time, I let myself wonder what would happen if I stayed for supper. I knew I'd be back next Saturday. Maybe this time I'd say yes. But I had no idea that the next time I walked through that door, I'd find out that I wasn't the only one who'd noticed. Someone else had been watching. Someone who didn't think Mommy should be smiling at anyone. And those 6-year-old whispers would lead directly into a confrontation that would force me to choose between the promise I made to a dying man and the living family I was terrified to claim. The next Saturday, I pulled into the driveway earlier than usual. The twins were in the front yard, wearing those yellow rain boots they refused to take off even when the sun was shining. They ran toward my truck before I killed the engine. This was new. They'd always been shy, hiding behind Maya's legs while I came and went like a repairman who didn't need names. Now they were tugging at my sleeves, pointing at the flower bed where they'd planted marigolds with their mother, shouting over each other about who had dug the deeper hole. I felt something shift behind my ribs. I hadn't realized how much I wanted this until it was already happening. Maya came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was laughing at the chaos, but when her eyes met mine, the laughter caught just for a moment and she looked away with color rising in her cheeks. I knew then she was thinking about what the girls had said. She wasn't pretending it hadn't happened. She was trying to decide what to do with it. "Supper's at 6, she said, not quite a question, not quite a statement. "The girls want you to stay. They made you a place card." I walked up the steps, keeping my voice casual even though my pulse was skipping. "A place card? Did they spell my name right?" "It says Mr. Owen with 2 O's and a smiley face." She smiled, and it was like watching frost melt off a window. "Ellie thinks you're part of the family now. I'm not sure what to tell her." I should have said something careful. I should have reminded myself that Tom's ghost was still sitting in that kitchen. Instead, I said, "Maybe you don't have to tell her anything. Maybe just let her be right." Maya's hand stilled on the dish towel. The world went quiet except for the twins giggling over their marigolds. She looked at me, and I saw the question she couldn't bring herself to ask out loud. "Are we allowed to want this?" So I answered the question she didn't ask. "Tom wanted you to be happy. He said so. He made me swear I'd make sure you were okay. I don't think he meant a leaky faucet. I think he meant this." She opened her mouth to answer, but the screen door banged open before she could speak. A woman's voice cut through the afternoon like a blade. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Margaret Calloway stood in the doorway as if she owned the place. Tom's mother. She was a tall woman, always immaculately dressed, with silver hair pulled back so tight it pulled at the corners of her eyes. She'd never liked me, not even when Tom was alive. She thought framing houses was beneath her son. She thought I was the reason he never went to college, never got a real job, never escaped the small-town life she despised. I hadn't seen her since the funeral, where she'd spent the whole reception telling anyone who'd listen that Maya should move back home with her, as if a grown woman and 2 children were furniture to be relocated. "Miss Calloway," I said, keeping my voice even. "Didn't know you were visiting." Clearly. She looked from me to Maya and something cold sparked in her eyes. "I came to see my granddaughters. I didn't realize you'd hired a handyman for the evening. Or is he staying longer?" Maya's face went pale, then red. "Margaret, Owen is a family friend. He's been helping around the house since Tom. I know exactly what he's been doing." Margaret stepped fully onto the porch, and I saw the twins go quiet by the flower bed. 6-year-olds understand tension the way animals sense a storm coming. "He's been making himself comfortable in my son's home, eating at my son's table, playing house with my son's wife." The accusation landed like a slap. Maya flinched. I felt anger rise, but I forced it down. Tom had told me years ago that his mother had never forgiven him for marrying Maya. She'd wanted a different kind of wife for him, someone from a good family, not a hardware store cashier with no college degree. When Tom got sick, Margaret had tried to take control of everything: the treatment, the bills, the children. Tom had fought her off until the very end. His last coherent words to me had been, "Don't let her take them." "You don't get to talk to Maya like that," I said, stepping between them. "Not in this house." Margaret's laugh was sharp and joyless. "This house belongs to my son, and my son is dead. What happens to his family is not your concern." "It's absolutely my concern. I made him a promise." "A promise?" She drew the word out like it was a dirty joke. "And what exactly did my son ask you to do? Move in, replace him, climb into his bed before the grass had even grown over his grave?" Maya made a sound like she'd been hit. The twins had gone entirely still now, small statues in yellow boots, their faces pressed together in confusion and fear. I wanted to pick them up and carry them somewhere safe, away from the poison spilling out of their grandmother's mouth. "You need to leave," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Now. Or what? You'll call the police." Margaret's smile was thin and triumphant. "I have every right to be here. Those children are my flesh and blood. And I've been speaking to a lawyer. You see, when my son died, he left a will. Do you know what it says about custody should anything happen to Maya?" I went cold. Maya grabbed the porch railing as if her legs might give out. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I'm saying that Tommy wrote a provision nomming me as guardian if you were ever deemed unfit. And I'd say having a strange man living in my son's house, spending nights under the same roof as my granddaughters, qualifies as unfit. Don't you?" I'd seen the will. Tom had shown it to me before he died, asking me to be the backup guardian. But I knew he'd never signed the final version before the cancer took his mind. His mother was bluffing, or she wasn't, I couldn't be sure. "You're lying," I said. "Tom didn't want you anywhere near those girls. He told me." "Did he? And do you have that in writing? Because I have a signed document and a very good attorney. So unless you want this to get ugly, and I assure you it can get very ugly, I suggest you walk away now, Mr. Owen. Go back to your apartment. Leave this family alone." Maya straightened, her voice trembling but fierce. "You can't threaten us. This is my home. These are my children. You have no right." "I have every right. I am their grandmother." Margaret's voice finally cracked with something beyond anger. It was grief twisted and rotted into control. "Tommy was my only son, my only child. I will not watch some stranger take his place while his wife forgets him and his daughters call another man daddy. I won't let it happen." Ellie started to cry. Nora wrapped her arms around her sister, her little face scrunched up with a courage that broke my heart. I knelt down, putting myself at their level, and spoke in the calmest voice I could manage. "Girls, can you go inside and play in your room for a few minutes? Your mom and I need to talk to your grandmother." Ellie shook her head, tears streaming. "I don't want Grandma to be mean." "I know, sweetheart, but it's okay. I promise, everything's going to be okay." Maya gathered them up, whispering reassurances, and carried them inside. When the screen door closed, I turned back to Margaret. The mask had slipped. For just a second, I saw the woman underneath, a mother who had lost her son and was now losing the last pieces of him. Grief didn't excuse cruelty, but it explained it. "Grit, I understand you're hurting. We all are, but this isn't what Tom would have wanted." "You don't get to tell me what my son wanted," she hissed. "You were just the man who built houses with him. I was his mother. I gave him life. I raised him. And you took him away from me long before the cancer did. Every summer he came home less. Every Christmas he chose Maya's family over his own. He built a life with you in it, and I got left behind. Now I'm supposed to watch you take the rest." The accusation landed harder than I expected because I realized it wasn't about me at all. It was about 30 years of losing her son, piece by piece, and having nowhere to put that grief except toward the people who still had each other. "That doesn't give you the right to terrorize Maya and her children." She straightened her jacket, regaining her composure like armor clicking into place. "I'm not terrorizing anyone. I'm protecting my family's legacy. You have until the end of the month to remove yourself from this situation. If you don't, my lawyer will file a petition for custody. We'll let a judge decide what kind of home is best for two little girls who have already lost their father." She turned and walked to her car without looking back. The tires crunched gravel as she drove away, and I stood on that porch alone, my hands shaking, my mind racing through every conversation I'd ever had with Tom about his mother. Had he signed that document? Could she really take the twins? Maya came back outside, her eyes red but dry. She'd been listening through the door. She stopped an arm's length away, and the space between us felt like a canyon neither of us knew how to cross. "Is it true?" she asked. "Did Tom tell you she might have custody rights?" I shook my head slowly. "He told me he wanted me to take the girls if anything happened to you. He said he'd change the will, but he never showed me the final papers. He got sick so fast at the end." "I don't know what he signed." Maya covered her face with both hands. "I can't lose them. She can't take my children. She can't." I reached out and gently pulled her hands down. "She can't do anything until she proves you're unfit, and you're not. You're a good mother. Everyone in town knows that. But until we know what's in that will, we need to be careful. We need a lawyer. We need to document everything." "Everything?" I hesitated. Then I said the thing I'd been avoiding for 2 years. "Us. Whatever this is, whatever we become, Margaret will try to use it against you. So we have to decide right now whether we're going to let her scare us apart or whether we're willing to fight for something together." Maya looked at me for a long time. The light was fading, and the marigolds the twins had planted were just fuzzy spots of orange in the dusk. She reached up and touched my face, her fingertips light on my jaw. "I've been alone since Tom died," she said. "I told myself I was fine. The girls were my reason to get up in the morning. But you've been here every Saturday, 2 years of showing up, and I never once let myself think about why. I was afraid. I was afraid of what people would say, what Tom's family would think, what I'd have to admit to myself." "What would you have to admit?" "That I stopped seeing you as just Tom's friend a long time ago. That I've been waiting for Saturdays the way I used to wait for him to come home from work. That when the girls whispered what they whispered, I wanted it to be true." Her voice cracked. "I wanted someone to see me again. Not as the widow, not as the poor thing left behind, but as me. Maya, just Maya." I didn't think. I pulled her into my arms, and she folded against me like she'd been holding herself upright for years and had finally found something to lean on. We stood there on the porch in the shadow of the house Tom had bought, surrounded by the ghost of a man I'd loved like a brother, and I let myself hold his wife and not feel guilty for the first time since he died. "Whatever comes next," I said into her hair, "we'll face it together. You, me, the twins. I'm not going anywhere." But promises, I was about to learn, are easy to make and hard to keep. 3 days later, I got a call from my boss. My job was gone. "Budget cuts," he said, but he couldn't meet my eyes when I went to collect my tools. Someone had called the company and made a complaint about my interference with a client's family. An anonymous report. The next day, my landlord gave me 30 days to vacate. Same reason. A concerned citizen had informed him about the kind of man I was, the kind of trouble I brought around. Within a week, I'd lost my job, my home, and my reputation in a town I'd lived in for 15 years. Margaret wasn't just threatening custody. She was dismantling my life piece by piece, and I knew she wouldn't stop until I disappeared. But I also knew something she didn't. I'd found something in Tom's old toolbox, tucked under the false bottom where he kept his emergency cash. A sealed envelope addressed to me, written in his handwriting, dated 3 weeks before the cancer took his ability to hold a pen. Inside was the final page of his will, signed and notarized, along with a handwritten note that made my hands shake and my eyes burn with tears I hadn't shed since his funeral. The note said, "If you're reading this, it's because my mother is trying to undo everything. I changed the will. You're the guardian, not her. I've been waiting to give this to the lawyer, but I was afraid she'd find it and destroy it. Don't let her take my girls. Don't let her break Maya. I'm counting on you, brother. Finish what I started." I had the document. I had the truth. But filing it meant declaring war on a grieving mother who had nothing left to lose. And before I could decide what to do, Margaret made her next move. She filed an emergency petition for custody, claiming Maya was cohabiting with an unrelated man, endangering the welfare of 2 minor children. The hearing was scheduled for 10 days later, and the judge assigned to the case was Margaret's second cousin. The news hit like a physical blow. Judge Harold Morrison, Margaret's second cousin. I sat in Maya's kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd fixed the disposal where the twins had whispered their secret, and I watched her face go slack with despair. For a full minute, neither of us spoke. The clock on the wall ticked like a slow heartbeat. Then Maya did the last thing I expected. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She got very, very still, and when she spoke, her voice carried a steel I'd never heard before. Then we don't fight fair, we fight smarter. She reached for the envelope I'd brought, the one from Tom's toolbox. She read it 3 times, her lips moving silently. When she looked up, her eyes were wet but hard. This is his real will, signed, notarized. He named you guardian. The document Margaret is using, it's the old draft, the one he told me he destroyed. She must have taken it from his office before he died, when he was too sick to notice. A new horror dawned on me. You're saying she stole a draft and is passing it off as the final will? That's exactly what I'm saying. She knew Tom was changing it. She must have watched him like a hawk those last few months, and when she found the old version, she hid it, waiting for her moment. Maya pressed her fingers to her temples. I should have known. She was always too helpful at the end, bringing meals, organizing papers. I thought she was finally letting go of her anger. She was just looking for ammunition. Now we had 2 documents, a fake will and a real one, and we had a judge who shared blood with the woman trying to steal Maya's children. The asymmetry was staggering, but I remembered something Tom used to say when a job site went sideways. You don't need the perfect blueprint, you just need one solid beam to build from. The first solid beam walked into our life 3 days later. Her name was Priya Sharma, a family lawyer who'd grown up in Wheatland, same as us, before leaving for law school and coming back to fight the kind of small-town power structures that had tried to crush her immigrant parents. She was 32, sharp as a tack, and she'd already won 2 cases against Morrison's rulings on appeal. When we showed her the 2 wills, she didn't flinch. She smiled. "This is better than I hoped," she said, sliding the papers back across the table. Margaret opened herself up to a fraud charge. She knowingly submitted a document she knew was superseded. If we can prove that, Morrison will have to recuse himself, family connection or not. No judge wants to be seen protecting a fraudster, especially one he's related to. How do we prove it? I asked. The notary. We find the notary who stamped the real will, get their testimony, and we find proof that the old draft was in Margaret's possession before Tom died. Phone records, a witness, anything. The notary was a retired school teacher named Gladys Porter, 83 years old and living in an assisted living facility 2 towns over. I'd known her since she taught my 4th grade class. When Maya and I walked into her room, she recognized me instantly. "Owen Hartley," she said, her voice thin but clear. "You still building houses?" "I'm still building, Miss Porter, but I'm here about something else." I handed her the notarized will. She put on her reading glasses, studied the stamp, and nodded. "That's mine, I remember this. Tommy came to see me on a rainy afternoon, must have been October. He was so thin, but his mind was sharp. He said his mother was trying to take control and he wanted to make sure his girls were protected. I notarized 3 copies, one for him, one for his lawyer, and one for you." She looked at me over her glasses. "He said you were the only person he trusted to finish what he'd started." The words hit me in the chest. I had to clear my throat before I could speak. "Miss Porter, would you be willing to testify about that day?" "I've been waiting for someone to ask," she said. "That Calloway woman came here 2 days after Tommy's funeral, asking if I'd seen any legal papers. I told her no. I could smell the cruelty on her. I'll testify. And I'll tell the court what Tommy told me, that his mother had threatened to sue for visitation before he got sick, that she had called Maya a gold digger, that she had said the girls would be better off with her. It was ugly. He was scared." The second beam came from an unexpected source. Brad Miller, the man Margaret had hired to pressure my landlord and my boss, showed up at my apartment 3 days before the hearing. I almost swung at him before he got his hands up. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm here because she's gone too far. She told me to intimidate you, maybe plant something in your truck to make you look bad. Drugs," she said, "but I got kids of my own. I can't do that to a man who's just trying to look after his dead friend's family." He handed me a voice recorder. I recorded our last conversation. She admits everything. The false complaint, the pressure on your landlord, the plan to plant drugs. She says your relationship with Maya is unnatural and that she'll do whatever it takes to get those girls. It's all there. I stared at the small black device in my palm. "Why are you doing this?" "Because my own mother was like her. Took my dad to court, lied, got full custody. I didn't see him for 12 years. When he died, I was a stranger at his funeral. I'm not doing that to someone else's kids. That night, Priya assembled everything in her office. The real will, Miss Porter's testimony, Brad's recording, and a timeline of Margaret's harassment. We have enough for a dismissal, she said. But we need to present it right. Morrison won't want to rule against his cousin, but he'll have to if the evidence leaves him no choice. And we need to be prepared for her to play dirty. She'll attack your character, Owen. She'll paint you as a homewrecker, a man who moved in on his dead friend's widow before the body was cold. You need to be ready for that. I looked at Maya. She reached over and took my hand. Then they'll see the truth, that he never pushed, that he waited 2 years, that he only stayed because 2 little girls asked him to. The night before the hearing, a storm swept through town, the kind of late autumn tempest that knocks down power lines and floods basements. I was at Maya's house, helping her board up the windows while the twins huddled on the couch, watching the weather alerts flash across the TV. The wind howled like something alive, and just before midnight a tree limb crashed through the back bedroom window. The room that used to be Tom's office. Shattered glass everywhere. Rain pouring in like a waterfall. I grabbed plywood and a hammer and worked in the dark, wet to the bone, nailing boards over the gap while Maya held a flashlight. When I finished, I turned and found her standing so close I could feel her breath on my face. The lightning flickered and I saw the same fear and longing that had been building between us for months. I'm scared, she said. Not of the storm, of tomorrow. What if she wins? What if they take my girls? I put my hands on her shoulders. She won't win. We have the truth. We have Tom's real words, and we have each other. I've been so careful, she whispered. So careful not to feel anything. Because Tom was my whole world, and when he died, I thought I'd never feel whole again. But you kept showing up, week after week, fixing things that didn't need fixing just so I wouldn't be alone. And I started to feel like maybe I could be whole again. Not the same as before, different, but still whole. She touched my face, her fingers cold and wet. I love you, Owen. I think I've loved you for a year, and I was too afraid to say it because it felt like a betrayal. It's not a betrayal, I said. Tom wanted this. He told me so. He said, make sure she smiles again. That was his exact words. Make sure she smiles again. She kissed me then in the dark with the storm screaming outside and the twins sleeping in the next room. It wasn't desperate like I'd imagined. It was gentle like the first note of a song you've been waiting your whole life to hear. When we pulled apart, she pressed her forehead to mine. Whatever happens tomorrow, promise me you'll stay. Always, I said. I'm not going anywhere. The courthouse was packed the next morning. Margaret sat in the front row with her attorney, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. She wore pearls and a black dress, the picture of dignified grief. When Maya and I walked in, she turned and smiled at us with such calculated pity it made my stomach turn. Judge Morrison entered, a heavy man with a face that looked permanently dissatisfied. He read the case file with a frown that deepened as he went. This is an emergency custody petition filed by Margaret Calloway, grandmother of the minor children, alleging that the mother is cohabiting with an unrelated man and creating an unstable environment. Mrs. Calloway, your evidence. Margaret's lawyer stood and launched into a rehearsed speech about morality, about the sanctity of the family, about 2 little girls who had already lost their father and now risked losing their mother to the influence of a stranger. He painted me as a drifter, a man with no steady job and a history of inserting himself where he didn't belong. He called Maya negligent. He suggested that my presence in the home was emotionally damaging to children who were still grieving their father. Then Margaret herself took the stand. She wept on cue. She talked about how she'd tried to reach out, how Maya had pushed her away, how she only wanted what was best for Tommy's bobbies. She mentioned the whispers, the rumors that had been circling town. She talked about catching me alone with the girls, implying something dark without ever stating it directly. By the time she finished, half the courtroom was looking at me like I was a predator. Then Priya stood up. She walked to the center of the room like a prosecutor in a courtroom drama, and she placed the original will on the evidence table. Your Honor, the document Mrs. Calloway has submitted as the basis for her custody claim is a draft. It was superseded by a final will, signed and notarized 3 weeks before Thomas Calloway's death. That will explicitly names Owen Hartley as the legal guardian of the children should anything happen to Maya Calloway. It explicitly excludes Margaret Calloway from any custodial role, and we have the notary here to testify. Margaret's face went white. Her lawyer started to object, but Morrison held up his hand. "Bring in the notary." Miss Porter walked slowly to the stand, leaning on a cane, and she told the court everything. The rainy afternoon, the three copies, Tom's clear state of mind, his fear of his mother. She spoke with the quiet authority of a woman who had taught 3 generations of this town's children and had never told a lie in her life. When she finished, Margaret's composure had cracked, but it was Brad's recording that shattered it completely. Priya played it for the court, and Margaret's own voice filled the room. "I don't care what you have to do. Threaten him, get him fired. If you have to plant something, plant it. That man is not going to replace my son." The courtroom erupted. Morrison banged his gavel, his face now red with something closer to fury. He looked at his cousin, and I saw the disgust in his eyes. "Mrs. Calloway, is this your voice on this recording?" Margaret tried to speak, but nothing came out. Her lawyer was frantically whispering in her ear. Finally, she straightened and said, "This is all because of that man. He turned my son against me. He turned this whole town against me. I lost my boy to cancer, and now I'm supposed to lose my granddaughters to a carpenter who doesn't even have a home." Priya stepped forward again. "Your Honor, the only person attempting to take these children from their home is Margaret Calloway. She has fabricated evidence, harassed my client, committed fraud before this court, and attempted to frame an innocent man. We move for immediate dismissal and sanctions." Morrison took a long breath. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with the weight of a family embarrassment he would carry for the rest of his career. "This court finds that the emergency petition was based on a fraudulent document and brought in bad faith. The petition is dismissed with prejudice. Custody remains with the mother, Maya Calloway. As for the conduct of the petitioner," he paused, looking directly at Margaret, "the court refers this matter to the district attorney for review of potential criminal charges including fraud, harassment, and attempted framing." Margaret collapsed onto her seat. The woman who had terrorized us for weeks looked suddenly small and old. She didn't look at us as we left. She didn't look at anyone. Outside the courthouse, the sun had broken through the clouds. The storm was gone. Maya and I stood on the steps, blinking in the light, while Priya shook our hands and Miss Porter accepted hugs from strangers. Ellie and Nora, who had stayed with a neighbor during the hearing, came running across the lawn when they saw us. They were still wearing their yellow boots. "Did we win?" Nora asked, breathless. I knelt down. "Yes, sweetheart, we won." "Does that mean you're staying forever?" I looked up at Maya. She was crying, but she was also smiling, and the smile reached all the way to her eyes. "Yeah," I said, "I'm staying forever." That night I sat with Maya on the porch of the house Tom had bought, watching the twins chase fireflies in the yard. The air smelled like wet earth and new beginnings. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I felt the last 2 years of careful distance dissolve. "I was so scared to want this," she said. "But when those girls whispered that I smiled because of you, I knew I couldn't hide anymore. They saw what I was too afraid to admit. You didn't just fix the house. You fixed us." I took her hand and held it against my chest. "Tom once told me that the measure of a man isn't what he builds, but what he leaves behind. He left behind a family that needed someone to show up. I just kept showing up. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being the guy who fixes things and started being part of the thing worth fixing." Maya lifted her head, her eyes searching mine. "So what happens now?" I smiled, and it felt like the first honest smile in years. "Now we live. Not in his shadow, not in her fear, just this, you, me, the girls, whatever comes next, starting with supper. I'm staying for supper, Maya, and every supper after that." And in that quiet moment, with the fireflies blinking and the twins laughing and the house behind us finally feeling like a home, I knew that Tom's real promise hadn't been about checking in. It had been about learning to stay. Sometimes the only way to honor the dead is to live fully for the living. And sometimes, the life you've been circling for years is the one that's been waiting for you to land. The weeks after the hearing passed in a blur of paperwork and quiet relief. Priya filed the motions to have the old draft formally declared void, and the district attorney opened an investigation into Margaret's conduct. Brad's recording was entered as evidence, and Margaret's lawyer quietly withdrew from the case. I didn't see Margaret again for a month, and when I did, she was walking into the police station with an attorney I'd never seen before, her silver hair uncombed for the first time in her life, her pearls conspicuously absent. She didn't look at me. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the hollow ache of a grief that had curdled into something unrecognizable, and I hoped she'd find a way back to herself. I moved into the spare bedroom in mid-November, not as a handyman but as a permanent fixture. Maya and I agreed to take things slowly for the girls' sake, but the girls had other ideas. Ellie had already started calling me Daddy Owen, and Nora had drawn a family portrait that included me and Tom, both of us standing on either side of Maya with the twins in the middle. When Maya saw it, she cried for 20 minutes, then hung it on the refrigerator. Tom was still part of our family. He always would be, but there was room for me now. The first real test came at Thanksgiving. Maya's parents drove up from the city, nervous and watchful, unsure what to make of the man who'd stepped into their son-in-law's shoes. I spent the morning frying a turkey in the backyard while Maya's father, a retired mechanic named Bill, watched me from the porch. He didn't say much at first. Then he handed me a beer and said, "Tom used to burn the turkey every year. Set off the smoke alarm twice." I never told him, but I always looked forward to it. He took a long drink. "You're not Tom, but these girls are happy. My daughter is smiling again. That's all I ever wanted." We ate at the table where Tom used to sit, and I felt his absence like a chair that had been pulled back for a guest who never arrived. But the twins chattered about their new swing set, and Maya held my hand under the table, and Bill told stories about Tom I'd never heard before. The grief was still there, but it had softened into something we could carry together. Christmas brought another milestone. The twins wanted to visit Tom's grave, and Maya asked me to come. I'd avoided cemeteries since the funeral, afraid of what I'd feel standing over the man I'd promised to protect his family, now standing beside his wife as something more. The day was cold and clear, the grass frosted white. Ellie and Nora knelt and placed a small wreath against the headstone. Nora whispered something I couldn't hear, and then Ellie stood up and said, loud enough for the whole cemetery, "Daddy, this is Daddy Owen. He's living with us now. Are you happy?" I felt my throat close. Maya squeezed my arm. I looked at the stone, at the name carved into it, and I spoke for the first time since the funeral. "Hey, Tom, I kept my promise. They're okay. I hope that's enough. I hope you know I love them. I hope you know this wasn't about replacing you. It was about continuing what you started." A gust of wind moved through the bare trees, and a single leaf, brown and brittle, landed on the headstone. It felt like an answer. The twins didn't notice. They were already running back toward the car, their yellow boots crunching on the frozen grass. By spring, the legal aftermath had settled. Margaret pleaded guilty to fraud and harassment, accepting a suspended sentence and mandatory counseling. She was forbidden from contacting Maya or the children for 5 years. I received a letter from her a week after her plea. It was 2 lines long. "I see now that Tommy chose you. I will not interfere again." I didn't show it to Maya for a long time. When I finally did, she read it, folded it carefully, and put it in the box where she kept Tom's letters. That was also the week I found out the truth about the twins' whisper. It didn't happen the way I expected. The girls had a play date with a neighbor's daughter, and Maya and I were cleaning out the garage, sorting through the last of Tom's old toolboxes. In the bottom drawer of his workbench, tucked behind a stack of sandpaper, I found a small wooden box I'd never seen before. Inside were 2 things: a silver locket with a photo of Tom and Maya on their wedding day, and a folded piece of paper covered in Tom's handwriting, dated 6 months before he died. The note wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to Ellie and Nora. "My darling daughters," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm not there to tell you myself, but I want you to know something important. Your mother is the strongest woman I've ever known, and she will need someone strong to stand beside her when I'm gone. There's a man named Owen. He's been my best friend since before you were born. He's the kind of man who shows up when things are broken and fixes them without being asked. I want you to know that if he ever comes around, it's because I asked him to. And if your mom starts smiling again because of him, don't be afraid. That's what I wanted. That's what I prayed for. It's okay to love him. It's okay to let him love you. Love is not a betrayal. Love is a gift you give to the living when the dead can no longer hold it. I sat on the garage floor and read it 3 times, and by the third time I was sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. Maya found me like that, holding the letter and shaking hands. She read it over my shoulder, and then she sank down beside me and held me while I grieved for a man who had somehow known exactly what would happen and had given his blessing before I'd even dared to want it. The twins must have found the letter months before I did. Tom had hidden it in a place he knew they'd look, the bottom drawer of his nightstand, where he used to keep candy he'd sneak them before dinner. Ellie later admitted, with the bashful pride of a 7-year-old, that she'd read it to Nora one afternoon when Maya was napping. They'd understood just enough to know that their father had given them permission to let me in. The whispers I'd overheard weren't spontaneous. They were the careful recitation of a promise planted by a dying man who loved his family enough to plan for their future without him. That revelation felt like the final piece of a puzzle I'd been assembling for 2.5 years. Everything clicked into place. The way Maya had slowly opened up, the way the twins had suddenly started greeting me at the door, the way the house had started to feel less like a memorial and more like a home. Tom had orchestrated it all from beyond the grave, not through control, but through love. He'd given everyone permission to heal. I sat down with Ellie and Nora the next day, while Maya made hot chocolate in the kitchen, and I asked them if they remembered finding Daddy's letter. Nora nodded solemnly. "Said you make Mommy smile again. He said we should tell you, so we did." "Did it work?" Ellie asked, her brow furrowed with genuine concern. "Is Mommy smiling?" I pulled them both into my arms. "Yes, sweetheart, it worked. She's smiling. You did exactly what your dad wanted." On the 1-year anniversary of the hearing, Maya and I stood in the backyard of the house Tom had bought, watching the twins chase a new puppy through the sprinklers. The garden had doubled in size. The porch had been repainted. I'd started my own framing business, and the first job I took was building a treehouse in the old oak at the back of the property. Tom had always talked about building one for the girls. I finished it on a Saturday morning in early September, and Maya hung a plaque above the door. "The house that 2 dads built." I proposed on a Tuesday evening in October, 2 years to the day after the first time I'd heard the twins whisper. There was no grand gesture. Just the two of us on the porch, the same porch where I'd once stood holding a wrench, too afraid to admit I wanted to stay. I gave her a ring I'd made myself from a piece of leftover framing oak, polished smooth and set with a small diamond. She said yes before I finished asking. And on a bright Saturday in June, with the fireflies just starting to blink in the dusk and the twins dressed in matching yellow dresses, we stood in the backyard and said our vows. Rosa and Priya were there. Bill and Miss Porter, a dozen neighbors who'd once whispered about us, now raised glasses in celebration. Ellie and Nora were the flower girls, and at the end of the ceremony, Nora tugged on my sleeve and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Are you our real daddy now?" I knelt down, just as I had that afternoon in the courthouse, and I said, "I've always been your real daddy. I just didn't know it yet." That night, long after the guests had gone home and the twins were asleep upstairs, I stood alone on the porch and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Tom was watching. I knew it, and I finally understood that the promise I'd made in that hospital room wasn't a burden. It was a roadmap, a direction I'd been too afraid to follow until 2 small voices had shown me the way. The life I'd been circling for years had finally stopped moving, and I had landed, not in Tom's shadow, but in his light. I used to think grief was a locked room. You go in, you close the door, and you sit in the dark until enough time passes that someone lets you out. But that's not how it works. Grief is a house you learn to live in. It has many rooms, and some of them are dark forever, but others have windows. Others let in light. Tom's death didn't stop being a loss. It never will. The twins will grow up without their father at their graduations and their weddings. Maya will always have mornings where she reaches across the bed and finds me instead of him. And I will always carry the weight of being the man who stepped into a space that wasn't originally mine. But here's the thing. Love is not a finite resource. It doesn't get used up. The love I have for Maya and the girls didn't take anything away from Tom. It added to what he started. It built an addition onto the house he framed. That's what I've learned. That the best way to honor the dead is not to freeze everything the way it was, but to let what they loved keep growing, to let their legacy become soil for something new. If you're watching this and you've ever made a promise to someone you lost, if you've ever been afraid to cross a line because it felt like betrayal, I want you to hear this. The person you love doesn't want you to be alone. They don't want you to stop living. They want you to find the window in the dark room. They want you to notice when someone's laugh starts reaching their eyes again. They want you to stay for supper. It took two little girls in yellow boots to teach me that. It took a whisper I wasn't supposed to hear. And it took a letter from a dying man who loved his family enough to plan for a future he wouldn't see. Tom wasn't just my friend. He was my compass. And the direction he pointed wasn't backward into grief. It was forward into something terrifying and beautiful. A life I almost didn't have the courage to claim. So if you're circling something right now, some possibility that scares you because it feels like moving on, maybe it's time to land. Maybe someone is waiting for you to show up. Maybe a promise is waiting to be kept. Thank you for listening to this story. If it meant something to you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And subscribe to this channel for more stories about the moments that change everything. I'll see you in the next one.